Hello and welcome back to the Morality Series, Part 2, where we'll discuss the common objection that different cultures hold to different moral values. But before we dive into this topic, be sure to check out Part 1 of this series. There's a link I'm going to put on the screen right here in order to get caught up. In Part 1, you will find out why this series is being made in the first place, as well as how moral relativism is self-defeating from the outset. So, what about the argument that cultures are different and therefore hold to different moral values? Examples abound, but here are just a few. In the Indian society where Hinduism is prevalent, for instance, they believe cows are sacred, whereas here in American society we are quite content to slaughter a cow for food, use its leather for jackets and shoes, and use the milk for our cereal. Another example is how we greet one another in various societies. Some seem to think it's appropriate to bow, others embrace, others to kiss, and here in America we do the handshake. Dress codes differ from culture to culture. You have an Islamic woman who will dress from head to toe, covering everything but her eyes. You'll have an American woman that will dress a bit more risque, and still, yet in Africa, many tribes will still have women that may not even be wearing a shirt. These examples seem to be very solid and foolproof, and seem to defeat my position. But upon closer examination of what's going on in each of these cases, it will reveal that objective morality is indeed still intact, while the differences we observe are ones of convention and ones of understanding. Check out what Dr. Frank Turek, author of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, says about it.
There's something that is objectively right or wrong, and there are other things that we might call convention. For example, objectively right or wrong, as you mentioned, don't kill your baby. Convention is whether you drive on the right side of the road or the left side of the road. Right? The Brits drive on the left, we drive on the right. But if the convention in Britain is to drive on the left, then you have a moral obligation to do so, because if you don't, you're going to kill yourself or others. So while the convention may be relative, obeying the convention is objective because it's there for the preservation of life. There are some cultures which say that when you greet somebody, you ought to shake their hands. Others say you ought to kiss them. Others say you ought to bow to them. All that is relative to the culture. What isn't relative is that when you meet somebody, you ought to greet them. Right? So the expression of how you greet may be relative to the culture, but not that you greet or show respect to somebody you meet. That's not relative. That's objective. Clothing is relative to the culture. In Iran, they're dressed head to toe, the women are. I've been there. Now, that's more religious, but they think it's immoral for a woman to show more than their face, sometimes even their face. Okay? Now, they may have different standards for what the dress code is, but we all agree that there has to be some form of dress. Right? We may have different standards, but we all agree that whatever the cultural standard is there, we ought to obey it.
Cultures have different values. This is a cow. Everyone can see that? Now, in India, cows are sacred. Where do we get sacred cow from? I assume it's from India. Is that where we get that from? I guess. And they're so sacred to the point that some people starve to death while cows are all around them. Now, obviously here, we have no trouble taking Bossy into the slaughterhouse and having a good steak. So our values, they seem to value cows more than people. What's going on? Right? That's a cow. This is grandma. Now, in India, they don't believe in slaughtering grandma, and neither do we, right? But why in India won't they slaughter a cow? You know why? Because they think grandma might be in the cow. They believe in reincarnation. See? And they think that some of the souls of their departed loved ones may be in the cow. Now notice, this is not a difference of values. This is actually a difference in understanding. You have an absolute value versus a relative understanding. The value is the same. You're supposed to respect elders and your ancestors. We agree with that, and so do the folks in India. What we have a different understanding in, or understanding of, is where is my ancestor? Where is Grandma? If we thought Grandma was in the cow, we wouldn't take her to the slaughterhouse, would we? The value is the same. Respect your ancestors. Respect life. What differs is the factual understanding regarding whether or not Grandma's in the cow. In India, they don't believe it's right to eat Grandma, and neither do we, right? It's not right to eat Grandma, okay? So the same value exists. It's just the difference in our understanding of where Grandma is.
Now, Dr. Turek is here on YouTube with his very own channel. If you'd like to check him out, please look in the description bar of this video, and you'll find a link to his channel. But I do hope that that helps you to understand the differences between objective morality and the relative understanding or relative conventions of culture. Stay tuned and plan on joining me in part 3 as we tackle one of the toughest objections from the atheist community, something I call the Nazi challenge.